Thank you for inviting me to speak with you today. I'm sorry I could not be with you in person, but I'm glad to have a few minutes to talk about such an important issue. I have heard that MP Nordqvist has just presented Denmark's efforts to ensure that public financial flows are consistent with the Paris Agreement. To complement that example, I would like to turn to how private financial actors can do the same. But first, let us recall what the Paris Agreement requires of us all, limiting the global temperature increase to well below 2 degrees, with the aim to stay as close to 1.5 degrees as possible. To achieve this objective, not only do greenhouse gas emission needs to reach net zero by 2070 or 2080 and turn net negative after, they also need to peak around 2020. This objective, was unanimously approved at COP21. Unfortunately, since then, it is far too often simplified to 2 or at best below 2 degrees C with no mention of 1.5. Even the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure relegated the 1.5 degree to a footnote under pressure from industry. We can't accept this. We cannot lower our ambition. To the contrary, we need to raise ambition by going further and acting faster than ever. Unfortunately, this is not what is happening. We are neither deploying existing low-carbon technology nor investing enough in breakthrough technologies to enable us to achieve deep decarbonization. And we need all hands on deck. Private sector finance will be key to fulfilling this objective because the trillions that needs to be shifted are, for the most part, in the hands of private actors. Indeed, financial flows can and must be Paris compliant from a financial, legal and moral perspective. I remember how we drafted Article 2.1c of the Paris Agreement. It explicitly refers to long-term ambition and making finance flows consistent with a pathway towards low greenhouse gas emission and climate-resilient development. There is no reason why this is not feasible. But what can private financial actors do to get this shift started? I think there are 2 key areas where investors have a clear role to play. The first one is in significantly boosting the allocation of investment to sustainable initiatives, and second, in rapidly ending the deployment of corporate capital towards high-carbon projects. Where should these trillions go? That's very clear. They are critically needed in electricity, industrial energy efficiency, transport, agriculture, water, buildings, and efforts to stop deforestation. At this point, you may be thinking the scale of the problem is just too big, and how we can get there in time. But just think about where we were a few years ago with investment in renewable energy. Who had thought the solar and wind energy would have made so much progress so quickly, representing today the principal investment in new installed capacity? This is the type of radical transformation we need from investors. Fortunately, new initiatives are supporting this process. At the level of individual investors, the Nordic region is leading the way on developing tools to help guide responsible and sustainable investment. The recently created Nordics One Eco-Label for investment is a major advancement that will allow private investors and consumers to make informed decisions and use their savings to support sustainable objectives. There is also good news on the institutional investor front, with the creation of the Climate Action 100+ initiative, in order to help companies move more quickly in the development and implementation of their transition plans. This initiative has committed $23 trillion of institutional capital towards deeper engagement with companies. This is highly encouraging, but we also need a high ambition coalition of financiers that commits to taking more ambitious action sooner. Both private financial flows and capital flows by corporates are critical for successfully shifting the trillions needed. However, if companies, including fossil fuel companies, continue throwing money at high carbon, non-Paris compliant projects, it just be impossible to meet the Paris goal. This means that major investors must reallocate capital towards climate solutions and use their votes to vote against management at companies that are not moving towards lowering emissions. in a reasonable time frame. They must become activists, so to speak. By signaling this type of demand at the national, institutional, and retail levels, we can harness the market potential and create investment products that pave the way for a low-carbon future for all investors, and in doing so, unlock the trillions. The energy transition is an unprecedented economic opportunity, and good investors know this. We have very famous examples, like a very highly recognized investor like Bill Gates. In order to seize this opportunity, they will need fit-for-purpose tools to allow them to make the right decisions. As we heard from MP Nordqvist's story about Denmark, benchmark and planning parameters used in the decision-making process end up determining outcomes. If the wrong assumptions are used, the wrong decision will be made. This will lead to both a failure to stop climate change and loss of capital for investors, with the resulting catastrophic economic impacts on savers. This is where key institutional players like the IEA come in. The IEA has an essential role to play in ensuring investors and policymakers have the right tools. In plain terms, this means Paris compliance scenario to inform decision making. You should be hearing from Michael Waldron from IEA very soon, in a few short minutes in fact, about the work that IEA is doing on devising new scenarios. The IEA has done much in recent years to develop scenarios more closely aligned with Paris, but we still have some way to go. We need a Paris compliance scenario, a really Paris compliance scenario, that is given the central and starring role in the world energy outlook. It should guide financiers and policymakers towards fulfilling the Paris Agreement and should chart pathways towards these goals without overly relying on untried and untested technologies. More and more investors and policymakers want to see this scenario, so it's important to reiterate that it should have an upper limit of 2 degrees. See, this is a minimum requirement. Ideally, the limit should be as close to 1.5 degrees C as possible. I hope this gives you some ideas to frame today's discussion, as that I haven't painted too bleak a picture. It's important to understand the challenge of the task before us, but we must not let it overwhelm us. We must move faster and go further than ever because climate change is happening, and it's up to all of us to decide how to face it. As financial actors, the task before you is imminently achievable. Just think, if 196 countries were able to sign an agreement on climate change, getting the financial sector to be Paris compliant is more than possible. If they can do it, so can you.